Just going to bring you into the shop right now and show you where I'm at on this 1969 TR6 frame. Outside, I'll just blast over there, I'm not sure if you can see, I've got about 2 feet of snow on my boat, and that's over on another TR6, just the bottom. That's the body, the frame, no engine or anything. It is really, it's minus 22 here right now. I'll just show you where we're at on this TR6. I'm just rebuilding or putting together the front chassis. Upper A's. The lower's all built. I'm using a brand right here. The Prothane brand. The reds. I've used them pretty much all along. Just trying to stay away from the rubber. The rubber wears out pretty, well, I don't know if it'd say quickly. It doesn't even wear out. It starts to deform. But I've got this one together. I'll take the crown nuts off and the cotter pins, and I'll change them over as well. This chassis has been completely torn down, completely rebuilt. You can see tools all over it. There's a lot of new stuff into this chassis. This chassis I bought, sorry, just around the hoist, basically just as a chassis. It had its trailing arms. Everything was in good shape except a lot of rot right up through this area. There was a lot of rot in here. The t-shirt top and bottom of it has been changed. There's a big lap. Just move this out. You might be able to see right in here where I webbed that right out up into the inside. There's another one shaped like an L. It goes in here. It's double capped right in here. Taking these out is pretty... It's alright if you're changing the top and the bottom because they do a whole lot of the retention. But they're not fun to replace. What I did with this one, I'll just move this again, was right in this area. When I took the old ones off, I needed a reference. So I used a butt bar that goes right up to here, and I got a diagonal score right out of the chassis here and here that related to that. And I used a real simple device. It was just a 24-inch aluminum square. And when it was butted right down on this area, it stretched up perpendicularly and touched on the bar I clamped on, and it gave me a reference for putting this one back on exactly in the same place. Eventually, when this, I've just got the original shims underneath the rear trailing arm mount. They're back in there, but I'm going to try and do a chalk line rear wheel alignment to get me a reference for my center line of chassis before when it's pretty much together, before the body goes on. But everything's all set up in the back. Shoes are done, trailing arms are done, everything's mounted up. I did a bit of a web in here. There's another one on the other side. I didn't do anything on the spring mounts. I've never found a problem with the spring mounts being a problem. It's just a light web in here, and I know this rear cross member can be a real problem. So many people have retroed these Triumphs over to what you would call a straight shock absorber rather than a lever shock. And what happens with that is it changes the whole, it's the geometric aspect of the way this works. And the way they mounted them had this, rather than taking a vertical load, it would take a horizontal load, which was multiplied so much because of the lever action of the shock mounts they used. I've got a couple actually over up on my part shelves that I've taken out of Triumphs because it's split it completely right at the weld points here, and down both sides, where I've had to take them and web them and weld them back on and then double web them. With those, I do a big strip here, and here. Luckily, this has never happened to this car, but just a quick stiffener on there. It doesn't hurt, as well as all the original welds are in condition. That differential, the differential was just fine. I changed the input and output bearings as well as the oil seals. But it's remounted and ready to go back out. But it's just a picture of the brake lines that are going back in. And here's the other rear trailing arm. And this thing here, there's another thing that comes up when you do what they call the T-shirts. With the motor mount off, what happens is the rear of the chassis almost becomes independent in that it flexes. So the way I do it is I set up the front part, or the front half of the chassis, basically, and I find my horizontal, and then I'll literally clamp it to my hoist so it's fixed. And then with this one here, when I did it, as soon as I cut that all out, the right rear over here actually pulled up, probably about 3/8 of an inch, whereas this one was hanging down. So when I do that, I put jacks on the floor and I set up my horizontal in reference here. And to do that though, I had about 40 pounds on this side just to hold it down in point as I replaced the top web. And then as I flipped it over, it all turned back over to this side where I put that poundage on. Now it doesn't, I don't care if it's level right now because it's all been fixed, but it was just trying to keep that parallel and that horizontal level, and it's worked out. But there's big patches on this chassis. They come up to here on the inside, on both here and here, and they run right back into this area here and there, because once these are off, I was able to just double pack that. Well, not pack it, but put in a nice piece of sheet. I used, I think it was about 46 thousandths of an inch, and webbed that in, and then MIG'd it, flipped it, MIG'd it, flipped it, MIG'd it, flipped it, MIG'd it, and just kept going over throughout. I've got the fuel line and the brake lines in, and this is pretty much where I'm at for this chassis. The pieces I showed you out in the snow, some of the, I've got a few TRs out there, and parts of them will put together. There's the upper ball joint that's going to go into there. But, oh, and there's the engine, the motor. That's a 69 original. It's all been rebuilt now. It was in actually quite good condition. There was hardly any cylinder wear. Rocker shaft, I've gone over to a rocker shaft with a rocker arm with bushings, and the secondary oil feed for your upper valve stream or valve train. You've pretty much got to do that just to maximize. And now it's got the spin-on oil filter mount and the wonders of an oil cooler. It's just like the early Porsches, the air-cooled Porsches, or even the ones right now. They get probably a good portion of their cooling just off of oil cooling, and it really makes a big difference on these engines. If you can keep that oil cool, it cools the engine as well as keeps your lubrication working much better.